Hello,
Hi,
hello.
how are you?
I'm doing very well, Julie.
Good.
Welcome to the Smoko podcast. It's so nice to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Meet the lovely Julie Daltro. She is an electrician for 16 plus years. We're going to talk today a little bit about her experience as an electrician and working within the trades and her experience as a woman in trades. We're going to talk about everything that she loves about being an electrician and her work experience. She is a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 353. She is part of two initiatives and organizations, the Membership Development and also the Women's Committee. So we're also going to talk a little bit about her involvement with the union and her local, all the work that goes into that, all the work that she does with that and the good that she does with that for the community, and just have a conversation about that. So Julie, thank you again. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thanks again for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. To start us off, because you've been an electrician for 16 years, and this is like one of my favorite things to ask is how did that happen? How could you describe kind of how you were introduced to the trade, and then how did you make that decision that you were like, you know what, an electrician is the trade that I want to do. I want to become a Sparky. How did that happen?
I actually, when I came out of high school, didn't actually know what I wanted to do. I worked at a hardware store for 6 plus years, and eventually my parents kind of pushed me to look at something else. So I decided I wanted to go into the trades. None of my family is actually in the trade, so it was something new, but
Oh,
my mom was very hands on. She liked to do projects, she was very handy like that. So I went to my local college and kind of talked to someone there, and they kind of asked me a few questions. What were my strong subjects in school? What I liked to do? What I didn't like to do? And they kind of geared me towards being a Sparky because math was one of my strong suits and I really
mm.
enjoyed it. So they kind of pushed me towards that. So I called my local union hall like my dad told me to do,
Aw.
and called and I called and I called and I called and I called. So eventually they finally took me in. Women back 16 years ago weren't very popular in the union. It wasn't, I'm not going to say there isn't any, but there
Mhm.
wasn't a lot. So
Mm.
it wasn't easy to get my way through, but persistence eventually paid off.
All the calls of keep on going and going. Oh my goodness. Well, that's kind of crazy that it's changed so much too, of like now 16 years later that you're a union rep and you're so hands-on with your union, that's
Yeah,
kind of interesting that at first you had to call them like 20 times to be like, "Hello, please let me come and become an electrician." That's a kind of
absolutely. Yeah. It's not an
hilarious.
easy task to become an electrician, like a union electrician. Most people start off in the non union. I just happened to be fortunate enough to get my first call out was a union. So,
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that there
yeah.
was a difference or that was difficult. How do you
In
get
my
into
in
it? Do you
my
just have to
city it's
join
more
one?
difficult.
Okay.
Not so much every city, but in Toronto it's not an easy task. So, that's
Okay.
kind of why.
Okay,
But yeah.
gotcha. Well, that's really lovely that that was your experience, that you went straight
Yeah.
into it. I love that story of you finding electrical work and becoming a Sparky and being like, "Okay, yeah, this clicks because I'm good at math." Did you find that you instantly loved it as soon as you decided to major that at your local college, or was there kind of a learning curve on that, or was it an instant like, "Yep, this is what I wanna do?"
I actually took a course. It was an online course. I decided, okay, I'm going to try electrical code.
Mm.
And I had one of my customers at the hardware store had an old code book, and I'm talking it was super old. So I decided to take this online course. I wasn't doing very well at it, but it was just kind of to gain a little bit of knowledge about the trade. So I decided I had to go finish my online last exam at the school.
Mm.
And you're kind of in like a computer room with the teacher there. And the teacher came up to me and he asked me, am I doing this for one of the classes or am I doing this just on my own? And I said, it's just for my educational purposes. And I'm just kind of trying to get a grasp of what goes on in electrical. And he actually took me into a classroom after the test was over and taught me how to read the code book. So it was kind of neat to have someone just give you that opportunity that you might not have had if you would have just gone right into the trades. And the funny thing later is I saw that teacher many years later
Oh,
again in trade school. So it was nice to have someone take that time to really educate you and want to make you learn, right? So yeah.
totally. That's
Yeah, and then once I
beautiful.
got on the tools, it was a great time of the year. I think it was September, so it was the season was good. So I just enjoyed the people I worked with and I was willing to learn and I wanted to do it. So it was quite the experience for
I
sure.
love that. I like that it was kind of like an instant connection and like on the tools and having a good time outside in the nice weather with people. But I love it that like we're only a couple minutes in and we've already had two like beautiful full circle moments of that teacher. What was that moment when you saw him at trade school? Like, did he recognize you? Was it
Yeah,
something that, ah,
yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was, and you know what? Code was one of my favorite classes, so to have that teacher kind of reach out was definitely something that I look forward to teaching somebody else, you know what I mean, in the
hmm.
future. So,
Yeah, to pass it forward and do that mentorship,
yeah,
like that he took you aside and taught you code. I think one thing that maybe came up from it that if people aren't aware of Sparkies or electricians, I feel like sometimes there's a misconception of what you guys do. And I feel like you just brought up electrical coding and kind of legislation, but also math as well and like
yeah,
permitting. And it's far more complicated than I think most people realize if they're not within the skilled trades. I
yeah.
was wondering because of that, could you kind of like walk through a day to day? If there is such thing as a typical day, what would that look like? What type of work would you do? What type of projects would you work on? Basically walk through it if people are unaware.
So my job was a residential electrician. There are a couple of different types of electricians. So my day to day was wiring houses. I wired
Mm,
houses, I put the lights on, I basically turned the power on to everybody's house. Plugs, switches, lights, fixtures, everything from start to finish. So, I mean, one day would be wiring the house, the next day might be putting the lights and the plugs and switches on. So that type would vary from day to day, but there is what we call an ICI electrician. So it's industrial, commercial, and institutional. So they're working in your schools, your hospitals,
mm.
your stores, and stuff like that. So that kind of electrician is very versatile. You could be working in a store one day or in a plant the next day. So that type of work is on a larger scale than a residential property like I was doing.
Thank you. Thank you for that
No
because I
problem.
feel like maybe some people don't know that or don't even know that there's two different types of residential and then commercial from it.
Yeah.
On the residential side, do you have, like, a favorite task where you're like, "Okay, I really love rewiring the plugs and the plugs only," or do you have a favorite type of project that you're like, "Oh, I love being able to work in a bathroom, please don't put me into an attic?" Like, how does that work?
So we both basically wired up brand new subdivision houses. So we
Mm,
were, my favorite thing to do was a finishing, which
cool.
is basically putting all the lights on, putting all the plugs on, putting all the plates on. I got to work by myself. I got to go at my own pace, blare my own music, do whatever I wanted to do as long as the house got finished. So that was my favorite only because on those cold, cold days in the wintertime,
Mm.
the heat was, I was in my t shirt and the guys were freezing next door, wiring the house. So that was probably my favorite part of it.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, of, like, the guys putting in all the electricity. Yeah, it would be completely not heated until the very end, but
Yeah.
that sounds very peaceful. Like, that sounds like, honestly, a wonderful day of just listening to your tunes and, like, getting to finish up a project and seeing it all pretty. Like, that sounds
Yeah.
really, really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, for it absolutely is, and at the end of the day, when you drive by a house, I did that, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of
Mm.
people, that's the pride that you take in those types of projects, right? So,
Oh, totally. My grandfather worked in construction and like still to this day, whenever we drive downtown Vancouver, my dad will like make a point to be like, your granddad did that building and that building and that building. And you're like, okay, like I would just like to drive 5 minutes in peace, please. But it's like every single time we pass one building. But there is so much pride in seeing that, right? And being like, yeah, okay, I was part of that. In terms of your career and aspect of your job of being an electrician, what's the most fulfilling aspect of it? And then maybe on the flip side of that, what's something that's a little bit challenging about your job?
Yeah, like I said, driving by something and knowing that it was you that did it or you that accomplished it. Those harder days, let's face it, not every day is wonderful and it's not
Hmm.
rainbows and butterflies. So you're going to have those hard days. I had lots of them where it was like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? But you're gonna have that with any job in all honesty. And you just honestly, I look at the better days rather than the negative days. The only it's cold. Let's face it, it's cold. There are
Yeah.
days when you have to bundle up, but I mean, in all honesty, you feel accomplished at the end of the day. You might be a little tired, but
Hmm.
you feel good about yourself.
I can feel you on that one. Like, there was one time I worked in a mine. Mines are also cold because they're just like completely, there's no heat, no nothing.
Yep.
Like, they're just like an open pit, but I worked in a mine up in Northern Ontario, and it was, like, -60, and it
Oh,
was disgusting, like, we'd be down there and be like, "Oh, I hate this, blah, blah, blah," and I'd be so grumpy, and then afterwards, I would come home and I'd be like, "Oh, it was incredible, and it was such a wonderful experience," and it was just like, you get over it, like, at the end of the day, it's such a beautiful thing that you're doing, and it's so fulfilling, but, like, in the moment, was I a grumpy bugger about the cold? For sure. Julie, switching gears a little bit, because I do want to spend some time talking about your role within the union because I think it's pretty fantastic. And I know that you're part of two initiatives. You're part of the membership development, but then also the women's committee of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 353. Could you kind of describe both of these roles within the union and then any initiatives of those committees? Like, why do we have those two committees and what do you guys do within the union?
so my job is to organize non-union shops. It's actually up to the worker if they want to join a union, not the bosses. So we want to grow our market share here in Toronto, and I'd love to see everybody here in Toronto have the same rate as a union electrician because let's face it, non-union electricians make probably in and around $20 less an hour than
Oh,
us,
wow.
and they have no pension and benefits. I mean, some will have maybe a little bit of benefits, but never a pension. So
Mm,
RSPs are great, but they eventually run out. And
mhm,
when you're older, you don't want to have to go back to work to
mhm.
earn a living to pay for your lifestyle, right? So
Yeah. And what is kind of the difference or the steps that it takes to become a union electrician? Do you just have to reach out to the union and ask if they're taking new members? Are you guys always taking new members? How does that work?
it really depends on what area you're in, if they have people that they're looking for. So Toronto, generally, to get into Toronto, you have to try to help organize the company that you're working for, or there's too many calls for what we have. So if we can't fill calls for our contractors, then within 72 hours, after that 72 hours, it will be put out to the street. So if any non-union electrician wants to come in, then that's how they would get in.
Oh,
But I
okay. I
can't
see.
speak on every local because
Union.
they're all different, right? So right across North America.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate that of just like kind of understanding a little bit more about the difference of it. But it does seem like that's insane that $20 less and also no pension and also probably less protection for workers' rights or safety of compliance of sites that they go to, jobs that they accept, right? Like it's
Yeah,
that's
we
a
excel in safety. Absolutely. And we're like a hiring hall too. So if you lose your job with one employer or the job finishes and they just don't need you anymore, you go back to the hiring hall, which is the IBEW,
Mhm.
and we just put you out with another contractor.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's really nice. It's wonderful to have that like protection with it. And so that's your day-to-day of membership development. Could you
Yeah.
kinda walk through the women's committee? Because I also know that you're part of that as well. What does that initiative look like?
So, the Women's Committee, we also have the Sisters in the Trade. So, we have a monthly meeting with the Women's Committee, and we also have, at the same time, we have Sisters in the Trade. So, any sisters that are part of the Carpenters local or whatever local they may be, they can come and have a meeting with us and they can feel more inclusive. So, we talk about everything from our day to day work life to what's going on in the community and what what's coming up next and what we can be a part of. So it's really enlightening for a lot of the sisters coming into the trade,
Mhm.
especially being able to vent, because not, let's face it, not every one of us has another sister or
Mm-mm.
just anybody to talk to on the job site, because having that person to be able to confide in with your everyday work life, or just to be able to talk the lingo with somebody,
Mhm.
it makes a big difference to have someone in your corner.
That's fantastic. That's a fantastic resource to have because I agree with you completely. I just think that there's not that many women who are working within these fields. And if you go to your job site, you might be the only one on job site, or there might be maybe one other. So it's nice that something like this exists, that you have that space that you can talk about it because. Yeah, sometimes all you need is just somebody who's gone through it that knows what like a night shift looks like or knows what getting stuck in an attic all day or in confined space looks like or knows when like a toolbox talk goes way too long and it's super obnoxious. Like you just
Yeah.
have that like shared experience kind of means a lot.
And just how to navigate through things too. Like, I mean, things happen on job sites, maybe
Mhm.
not necessarily with your brothers and sisters, but with other trades, right? If you're having any difficulties with somebody who's giving you a hard time or whatever it may be, these women can help you navigate or help guide you through those incidents, right? So,
Mhm. No, that's really powerful. What I didn't know, Julie, is I didn't know that other sisters can come into the IBEW or from other trades. I didn't realize that. That's a pretty fantastic and even bigger network. That's awesome.
yeah, it's great because you know what? When we first had a women's committee, there wasn't many people that were wanting to come. I mean, let's face it, our lives are busy. It's to
Mhm.
add an extra night during the week to come down to Toronto isn't always necessarily the easiest thing to do, right? So to have other trades come in and fill the room and just to have someone else to talk to as well, it really makes a difference.
Yeah, no, completely. And like have mentorship, have someone to help guide you, kind of help walk through everything. I think that's a pretty beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of good that you guys do that we already talked about a little bit of like safety protection and job rights and helping women within the trades. Is there a moment of all of your union work that sticks out for you that's like a special memory or a favorite memory?
Actually, there was one member who got up to the mic on union meeting night. I wasn't even actually in the room. I was outside talking with somebody, and they called me into the room because he went up to the microphone and he just wanted to thank me for
Oh.
changing his life. So these non-union workers have these awful conditions, being treated by their boss horribly, and
Mhm.
to come into a different environment. And I mean, he called me all the time, which it didn't bother me. I'm happy to help and answer all his questions. But he said, you know what? She always answered my questions. She was always there for me and she changed my life. So I just want to thank her. So there was a lot of people at the meeting, probably anywhere upwards of 75 people, and they're all clapping. And you know what I mean? That moment made me realize that this job, you really
Mhm.
make a difference in people's lives and you don't even realize it. So,
Oh my god, that's beautiful. Like that's really cool. You must be so proud of yourself and that's amazing cuz
yeah.
and I think like maybe something that can brush aside or go too fast if you think of like non-union versus union is how difficult some of these industries and some of these job sites can be. And like, yes, they can be dangerous, but they can also be extremely toxic. We know that trades and sciences and kind of remote, we have a high problems of addiction, of mental health, of depression. Like it can be a really, really hard environment and a hard life. So the fact that you could have taken them from that situation, I don't know a situation, but something like that to then protected and supported, like that's pretty beautiful. And
Yeah.
that's pretty gorgeous that you probably did save his life. Like that's very empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. It just makes you, on those bad days, kind of rethink the way other people are thinking, right? So it
Mhm.
just, I don't know. Those hard days aren't so great because there are, let's face it, there are highs
Mhm.
and lows in this job, right? I get kicked off job sites all the time. And you'd
Yeah.
think, how easy is it to tell someone to go from these awful conditions, these horrible pay, and you try to talk to them about the union and they want nothing to do with you. And you're like, am I missing something?
Mhm. Yeah, do
So
you know I'm on your side, man? I'm trying to help you, please.
trying to
Yeah.
better your life here. But I
Yeah.
mean, some people are just, rumors get said about unions, and unfortunately, people believe those rumors are untold truths. Unfortunately, it's up to us to now break those barriers down and try to prove to them that it's not such a bad place to be.
Maybe if we could take a moment to talk about that, because I do think that there is a lot of misconceptions about unions. And I was wondering if you could speak to that and maybe dispel any of those common ones that are maybe being a barrier to entry that people, especially maybe young women that are a little bit scared of joining a union. Could you maybe dispel a myth or talk about the misconceptions there?
Well, I mean, for me, just alone in itself, being in a union, you're protected. You don't
Hmm.
have to worry about things that could go on. Like, we have a representative that will, we call them business reps, but they take care of you. So if something's going on a job site, we have stewards that also watch over the job site, and they're there for the workers. They're not there for the
Hmm.
contractors. So if something's going on, if you don't feel safe, or you're more than welcome to go to your steward or call your business reps. It will be dealt with. And it won't necessarily being you being removed. Like,
Hmm.
I find people figure that's the solution to the problem is removing the female because that's the issue. Well, no, that's not the issue. It's the person that's causing the issue is the
Hmm.
problem, and they need to be removed, whether it be a job site
Hmm.
moving or potentially completely gone. So that part of the union I've always promoted. I've had another female saying she came into the union. I brought her in and she was being bullied every single day because she was lesbian,
Mm.
and she would eat her lunch in her car
Aw.
and just being treated horribly because
Yeah.
of how she likes to live her life, and that's no business of anybody's.
Hmm.
So I mean, that kind of stuff you don't have to worry about in the union.
Hmm.
You will be protected, and you will have someone that represents you. So you don't have to worry about leaving your job or going to do something else, leaving the trades altogether. But it's not even only the union reps too. Like, I'll give you an incident when I was on the tools, and there was a gentleman, he was not from our trade, he was from a
Mm.
different trade, and he would constantly corner me and like say inappropriate things.
Ugh.
And I didn't want to say anything because being a female in the trade, it was like
Yeah.
hard enough having that stigma, and I
Hmm.
didn't want to cause another problem. So I just ignored it, laughed it off, and one of my colleagues actually heard the conversation
Mm.
and had this gentleman thrown off site and not to come back ever again.
Good.
So it's not only your union
Yeah.
reps that are going to do something and stick up for you, it's your colleagues and your brothers and sisters who you're
Yeah.
working with that will actually have your back as well. So that's another plus of having a union, whereas in a non-union situation, they're more afraid of losing their job than they
Hmm.
are of helping you out. So that's a powerful statement there.
No, thank you for adding that because I think that is a very powerful statement. I'm happy you brought it up because it is like a true community. I know that we've kind of skirted around it, or we talked a little bit about it indirectly, is about increasing the representation of women within trades, which is something that you're really passionate about. I'm very passionate about as well. And I know we talked a little bit about misconceptions of unions, but I was wondering if we could talk about misconceptions of working in the trades. Any misconceptions which you think are holding women back from entering a trades career? Maybe they're a little bit nervous about taking that first step. Could you kind of dispel any misconceptions there?
I'll first off say it's not an easy place. Like, when I used
Hmm.
to go to job sites, it's scary.
Hmm.
And once you start working and meeting those people, it makes it that much easier. So, I mean, misconceptions about working on the tools, I'm not going to say it's not easy because there are
Hmm.
days where it's like I said, it's cold, it's hot, you're working in different types of conditions, but it's how you feel at the end of the day. Like, I came out of right out of high school working in a hardware store right to the trade. I didn't have
Hmm.
to go and spend a bunch of money in college and try to find a job after. I was literally starting my career getting paid to do it. So
Hmm.
that's one thing that I recommend to most people. And when I'm talking at high schools and I'm talking to high school kids and parents is, I mean, they always try to push college, and
Mhm.
that's not always the case. Is
Mm-mm.
more and more people with academics are coming into the trades. It's not a scary place. They show a comparison of how much debt you're in after
Mhm.
4 years of school to how much money you'll be making after 4 years in the trades. So we get a lot of people coming in, engineers and all kinds of people that can't get into their thing that they've actually applied for in college and university. So there's many females that come in, or women that come in as their second career, and it's the best move they made. They don't
Mhm.
have to go to school. They're literally just going right on the tools. I mean, obviously, there's some safety and orientation
Mhm.
that's done ahead of time. We don't just say, "Hey, you're coming into the
Great.
IBEW,
Yeah,
get on the
exactly.
job site."
Here you go. This is a dangerous piece of equipment. Go freaking wild. Yeah, no.
No, you go through a 2 week safety and orientation before you even go onto a job site. And then they also have job site specific training too. So
Mm.
you go to a first job site, they'll kind of go over what the do's and don'ts are for that job site as well. So I highly recommend it to any females looking to
Mhm.
get into the trades. It was something I feared as well. It was very nerve wracking for me, but once I did it, I mean, I'll never look back ever. So
Ah, I love that answer. Like,
yeah,
and I agree. Like, I think people don't realize the trades is such a good way for young women to have financial independence at a young age, which
agreed.
I think is so important. You're right. It's very hard to have that in college without having a significant amount of debt. And you know what? College isn't for everybody. For some people, it might not be the best fit. And maybe you don't have to go through a bunch of training right away. Like you obviously do safety training, but there's also something very beautiful and something very fulfilling of learning while doing and getting better at kind of mastery of your craft as you increase your hours worked.
Yeah, I mean, we do have schooling. I mean, you're not getting away from it. We
No.
do have
Yeah.
block training, like you said, but it's nothing in comparison. You actually get paid to
Mhm.
go off. You collect unemployment, and I mean, we as a union top it up as well. And then we have tons of free courses. When you're finished all your trade school and you're a journey person, or even as an
Mhm.
apprentice, we have so many free courses that you can take to better your learning and to better yourself as an employee as well, right? So
Mhm.
because you get all those hours for your apprenticeship, so why
Mhm.
not do them? We actually have a program in Toronto. It's a pathway program for
Mm.
women, and it's a 16-week program. It's a government initiative, so we've gotten money from the government, and they're actually getting paid, and they're in a classroom for 16 weeks, kind of learning a little bit about the electrical trade. And then they're off to an employer for 10 weeks. And after that 10 weeks, they decide if they want to take them on as an apprentice or not. So it kind of gives them a little bit of a taste of what reality is. And then
Mhm.
after that 10 weeks, I mean, it's mutual decision. If you don't want to
Mhm.
go back, then it's totally up to you, but it's something you can try out for sure.
Thank you for bringing that up, and I'll link it in this episode. That's a
Yeah.
wonderful program because I think it is best of both worlds, right? Like you
Oh,
get like
absolutely.
yeah, like, you get hands-on experience, which I know coming from, like, college is you do your university degree and then you try to get into the real world and you're like, what did I learn? How am I supposed to use that? Like, what? Like, where do they kinda come and they link up? Like, that's beautiful that they can learn it and also be working with an employer right away, and then if it is a good match, that's perfect career succession and, like, career stability, like, that's amazing. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I know one thing that I kind of want to talk about, and it sounds like a pathway program like this kind of allows women to stay within the trades, but I kind of want to talk about something that I don't know if it happens within trades to the same extent, but within sciences, there's kind of like a women focused issue called the leaky pipeline phenomenon. And that's that women leave the profession at a higher rate compared to men. Is this something that's similar within the skilled trades? And as a tradeswoman with 16 plus years of experience, could you kind of speak to like career growths, kind of moving on up? We talked a little bit about journey person and then maybe red seal and then senior roles which are available, any career growth that's available within the skilled trades.
Yeah, for sure. In all honesty, regarding the leaky pipeline issue, I honestly think that women in the trades move on to bigger and better things. There's so many other things that you can do within the trades
Mhm.
that, I mean, let's face it, more and more females and women are taking on these roles that never have been taken on before. Like my
Mhm.
position as an organizer, membership development, I mean, I'm the very first female in Toronto to have this
Ah.
position of 120 years. Like, so we are taking over and we are going to be seen in more and more roles as we move into the future. So, absolutely, there's tons and tons of things for women to do in their second career. And I encourage it. Get involved in your union, show them your face because we aren't going away.
Ah, I love that tagline. Also, congratulations. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
How did that
Thank
feel?
you.
W-
It was kind of nerve wracking to tell you the truth. They, well, first of all, said I was the first in Ontario, so I mean, I
Whew.
don't really talk about that one because I'm hoping that there's going to be more and more of us. But
Mhm,
I mean, Toronto is a big thing because we, for so long, have not had women in these types of roles. So to
mhm.
be moving on up is something to feel proud of.
Oh my god, yes, you should, like, that should be you should have a plaque and a title of that, like, that's incredible. Congratulations. I love that answer that the leaky pipeline doesn't exist, like, we're trying to get over it in sciences, that's so beautiful that that's not a thing in trades, that there's so much
Yeah.
growth and availability of unions. It also seems to, from an outsider, it seems like you can also move off the tools whenever you would like, and you can kind of have a combination of on the tools organizing within unions, kind of as a foreman, maybe having your own firm, your own business. It just sounds like there's a lot more opportunities where sciences, I feel like we get really stuck maybe in one role to a certain extent, unless you want to go corporate. Is that true? Is there kind of a choose your own adventure about the trades that you can kind of do field and office?
Absolutely, absolutely. At first, in all honesty, when I was on the tools, I was thinking that I wanted to be an ESA inspector. So you're inspecting electrical work. So this isn't even a job that I envisioned for myself. So, in all
Mhm.
honesty, things happen when you put your mind to it. So I
Oh.
encourage all women to get out there and, like I said, put your time in. Do I mean I don't encourage an apprentice to go out and try to get up to the top right away, but put that time in and get to know your colleagues, get to know your union, and you never know where things will lead.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. That like think of that as when we started this interview that you were like, I tried to get into my local union and I called and I called and called. And now you have the plaque to be like, I'm the first in Ontario. Like that's pretty insane. Oh, I absolutely love that. And maybe that's it. Maybe this is leading directly to the next one is you did not expect that to happen, but what's
No.
something that surprised you in terms of your career in the skill trades? Anything that you really did not expect? Maybe it's this title when you first started.
Yeah, in all honesty, I didn't even go to women's committee meetings in the very beginning. It wasn't
Mm,
until I was invited to a conference that I went to, and a sister kind of took me under her wing, and I started going to union meetings and becoming more involved. And then eventually, my business manager would ask me to be on trial board and do this,
mm.
that, and the other thing. And I mean, I would always just say yes. So it was kind of like, what's the next adventure, right? So,
Mhm.
like I said, you never know where that road's going to lead you, but don't be afraid to take that leap. It's worth it.
How was
Yeah.
that transition as you started becoming more involved with like women's committee and giving speeches and talking? Like, did that come naturally to you? Was that something that you had to work on? Is it something that in your mind you were like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this before you stepped out? How did that happen?
I honestly, so the hardest thing I had was getting up on the microphone. And
Mm,
I've become more accustomed to just getting up and speaking. But in all honesty, I loved it. I was a social butterfly. So coming to meetings, I was a little shy at first, not
mm.
knowing who people were. And even being at a union meeting, it's sometimes like foreign language. You don't know what's going on. There's all kinds of words they're using, and you don't know what they're trying to say. And
Yeah.
so, but once you come to more meetings, you pick up a word here and there, and oh, you saw this person the last time. So how's it going? And you know what I mean? Just a little conversations. And then eventually it grows into pretty much a lot of people you go in knowing. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Like,
how's it going? How's your kids? You know what I mean? So you get involved with people's lives. And,
hmm.
I mean, I enjoy going to union meetings every month because I get to see people I wouldn't normally see on a regular basis. So,
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, all your
yeah.
friends and colleagues and people from the community. I think There is kind of that aspect. I don't know if it's just that like a gruffness of working within like resources or trades, but like there is kind of a family aspect of it. Like maybe it's dysfunctional at times that you're like,
Oh, 100%.
yeah, like you're like, that's the uncle we don't talk about, or like don't like it has potentially a dysfunctional part of it. But there is something like the guys that I worked with on the ship, because we were out together for 2 months at a time and we would never come into to land. We honestly did become like a family, and like those
Yeah,
guys would do anything for me. Right. Like if anything happened, they would have my back. And it was just a very kind of cool thing to have. But when I first walked in, it was very intimidating. There were like all these gruff Texans, and
yeah,
I didn't even know what they were saying. I was like, I have no idea. Like it's all drawls and it's all acronyms. Like I don't know what's happening. But
yeah. Yeah, it's great. Like there's two guys I used to carpool with going into downtown every day, and I still talk to them to this day. I mean, we don't talk all the time, but
Mm,
every once in a while we shoot a text to each other. One doesn't even live in this province anymore, but we still keep in contact. So it's good to have those relationships that you can still fall back on even though you don't work together anymore.
mhm. No, it's pretty special. Like that's a pretty amazing thing. With industry and with kind of union, but also with being a Sparky and being an electrician, what has been something that's really changed since you first started your career? Anything that's kind of top of mind? And then after that, what would be your hopes for the future of the trades? Like, where would you like us to go as an industry?
So I'll say when I first got into the trades, I was a lot more quiet and soft spoken. And my dad says to me at one point, I remember him saying, where'd my little girl go? And I said, she's fucking gone.
She fucking
Because I
doesn't
was,
exist.
yeah, because I didn't take crap from nobody anymore. I was just
Mm,
like, you can say all you want, but I will chirp back and I won't let you walk all over me anymore. And I'm not saying that my dad did that, but I'm
mm-mm.
saying that anity that dared to try me, I wouldn't let them
They will
walk
live
all
to
over me.
regret. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That confidence of it. I love that. That's a
Yeah.
fantastic answer. Trades is
Yeah.
like confidence building 101. Like that's
Oh, agreed.
yeah,
Agreed.
that's awesome. And where do you hope that we go as a future? Do you hope that more women become like she's fucking gone as well, or where do you hope that we go?
Absolutely. I wish that more women in the future can find their voice to stand
Mm,
up to those that they may not have stood up to before. So I wish it for every person that wishes to do so. Obviously, you don't have to conform to what I do, but to have your voice and to be able to stand up to anybody.
mhm,
That's what I wish. And for more women to be in the trades, not to be afraid to come in and to try it out. And if you don't like it, then it is what it is. We're not
mhm.
forcing anybody to love it, but we're encouraging people to try it for sure.
We are forcing you to try it. Yeah. You must try at least 1 hour on the tools at all times. I do think there's something about like being able to use your hands or figure out a problem, because I think that's ultimately what trades is about. It's problem solving and doing it kind of on an independent way of like it's just you and like limited resources, limited people, figure it out. Like there's something about that situation that's very empowering. Like you can't go out of that situation without having your voice and without being like, yeah, don't muck with me. Like I will I will check you if you need to be checked.
100%. I'll tell you a little story. The very
Mm,
first electrical project I did with at my mom's house, she never had a doorbell, so I decided I'm gonna install a doorbell for my mom.
mm,
So I did it, and I mean, I checked for power because you have to hook up this transformer to constant
mhm.
power, and I did all this, and everything was working. And I go to test the doorbell, and it all worked. And then one day, my mom says,
Uh-oh.
"Oh, the doorbell's not working. I don't know what's going on."
Mm.
So I ended up figuring out that I hooked it up to the light that was in the basement that was on at the time because I was working down there. So the
Oh.
doorbell only actually worked when the light was on. So, I mean, there's always trial and error. You
Mhm.
don't always get it on your first try, but this was my very first project. I'd never been in the trades before, so it was kind of a funny story. Because, I mean, even being an electrician for 16 years, I definitely have a chuckle when I tell that story, so
I love that. That's actually so cute to be like, yeah, you have a doorbell, but go down to the basement first and
turn
turn
the
this
light
on.
on.
Yeah. Leave that on 24/7. Don't ask any questions. Honestly, like, I love that you brought that up because I think, like, every woman in trades or sciences has a story like that, and I think maybe, like, a misconception that I fell victim to when I first started was I thought that I had to be perfect at everything because I was a
Yeah,
minority, and I
yeah,
thought that, like, there was no room for error, and I now realize that that's complete bullshit, but when I first started, I was so nervous about that, and I always think about this one time that I didn't really grow up with tools, so I didn't really know how to use them, and I'd only been doing, like, geology and, like, pure science, but on the ship, you're kind of a jack of all trades because they're like, "You have to be able to do everything. There's only 10 of you, so, like, please go do this." Anyways, they had given me something, they're like, "We need you to sand this, we need you to refinish this table, we need you to, like, bar top it, the whole bit." I was just, like, learning as I was doing, and they were like, "Whatever you do, just, like, please don't get it dust into the equipment because there's all this, like, technology around there, so please just, like, make sure that everything's clean." And I dutifully draped these 2 monitors with plastic, and I started getting to going. And my boss walks in, she goes, "Alexis, what the fuck?" And I had only secured those 2 monitors, and the rest of it was a complete lab, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment. Everything's electrical, and but for some reason in my brain, I was like, "The 2 electrical things are the computers." Like, that's all that I need to do. Like, I don't need to secure the like fancy LiDAR system or like the microscopes or like we were getting dust. Like we were cleaning up dust for 3 weeks. It was everywhere. It was in
Oh my
every
goodness.
single like little bit of equipment. And by the end of it, like that entire ship was making fun of me. Like the 2 months, like I was like the Canadian dust girl. And they would be constantly be like, "Oh, I don't know, Alexis." Like it was but it was like one of my very first expeditions and like I will always think of that story because it was just something super super funny, but my boss was also so lovely about it and she was like, "Honestly, it happens all the time. Like you're a rookie. It's
Yeah.
okay."
Hilarious.
But there was dust everywhere. And then maybe to end us off to because this has been so lovely and it's been so nice to speak with you. Any advice for somebody who's just starting out? Because as you know, we are facing a huge skilled labor shortage in North America. And I think that this is a fantastic opportunity and an awesome opportunity for women to enter the trades. And I do feel like there's this momentum. And I think more women are finding out about the trades and entering the trades. Any advice for someone who is just starting? Maybe they're a little bit nervous. Any words of wisdom?
Well, my first words of wisdom is if it's this is something that you want to do, make sure you're persistence
Hmm.
because persistence pays off, as you saw in my first question. If it's if you keep calling, making those phone calls, eventually they will want to take you. I mean, obviously, this day and age, it's more likely for them to take a female versus 16 years ago.
Mhm.
But like I said, if this is something that you want to do, don't give up.
Hmm.
I encourage everybody to give it a go, and if it's like I said, if it's something you don't like, at least you tried, right? There's
Mhm.
no harm, no foul. So
I think like you even brought this up too is that at first, like the first step when you come in, it's going to be a little bit scary, but then they're going to become your dysfunctional family. You're going to figure out what all the terms mean, what they're saying, and you'll get more comfortable with it with time.
absolutely. I mean, they don't expect you to know everything on the very first day. It will come in time. They have to remember as well, they've had their very first day too. So, I mean, we've
Mhm.
all been there, and just keep that in mind too. Not everybody
Mhm.
starts their very first day knowing everything. So,
Yeah. And even if you know something, you might sand a table and wreck 10,000 of dollars of equipment. You know what I mean? Or you might hook up a light to the basement like it happens to the best of us.
absolutely.
Ah, well, that's amazing advice. And Julie, thank you so much for this. This has just been such a pleasure. It was so nice speaking with you. It's so nice learning more about the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, about your job within the union, about all the good that you do. And just thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks again, Alexis.
Ah, this is awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. This is the Smoko podcast, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.